My name is Alex, and life sometimes takes strange turns. My wife Emma and I had been married for 5 years. We lived in a cozy little house not too far from the city, but far enough to enjoy peace and quiet. Emma's mother Laura lived nearby. She was always around, helping us with chores, cooking delicious meals, and being there when we needed her. Laura was a beautiful woman, elegant and graceful. Even in her early 50s, she had a charm that was undeniable. One summer, I had an accident while fixing the roof of our house. I slipped and fell, resulting in several burns from a nearby BBQ grill that tipped over during my fall. Emma was away on a business trip, and I was left alone, injured and in pain. It was Laura who came to my rescue. She found me, called for help, and stayed by my side through the whole ordeal. Her touch was gentle, her voice soothing. After my hospital stay, Laura insisted that I move into her house so she could take care of me. Emma agreed, worried about me being alone. Laura's house was large and welcoming, with a beautiful garden that she tended to with love. It felt strange at first staying in my mother-in-law's home, but her kindness made me feel at ease. Laura's care was meticulous. She dressed my wounds with such tenderness, her fingers brushing against my skin in ways that sent shivers down my spine. She cooked my favorite meals, kept me company, and made sure I was never in discomfort. There was a warmth between us that I couldn't ignore, a connection that grew stronger each day. Late one evening, as I lay in the guest room, Laura came to check on me. She wore a silk robe that clung to her curves, her hair loosely tied back, making her look younger and even more beautiful. She sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes filled with concern. "How are you feeling, Alex?" she asked softly, her hand resting on my shoulder. "I'm doing better, thanks to you," I replied, looking into her eyes. Her touch lingered, and I felt a spark of something forbidden, something thrilling. Laura must have felt it too, because she quickly withdrew her hand and looked away, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "Good," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "If you need anything, just call me." I watched her leave, the sway of her hips mesmerizing. That night I couldn't sleep. Thoughts of Laura invaded my mind, her touch, her scent, the way her eyes seemed to hold secrets. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't help the feelings that were growing inside me. Days turned into weeks, and Laura and I grew closer. We shared stories, laughed together, and enjoyed each other's company. One afternoon as we sat in the garden, Laura told me about her life, her dreams, and the loneliness she felt since her husband passed away. "I miss having someone to share my life with," she admitted, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm here for you," I said, my hand covering hers. "You don't have to be alone." She looked at me, her eyes filled with gratitude and something else, something I couldn't quite decipher. There was a charged silence between us, a tension that was both exhilarating and frightening. I wanted to reach out, to hold her, to comfort her in ways that were more than just friendly, but I held back, unsure of how she felt, afraid of crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Yet every touch, every glance, every word seemed to pull us closer together, weaving a web of desire that was impossible to ignore. The day came when Emma returned from her trip. She was happy to see me healing and thanked her mother profusely for taking such good care of me. I watched Laura, wondering if she felt the same mix of emotions I did. Her smile was warm, her demeanor as loving as ever, but there was a flicker in her eyes, a hint of something that made my heart race. Emma was back, but the connection between Laura and me didn't fade. It was as if an invisible thread tied us together, pulling us closer with each passing moment. I knew it was dangerous. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't help the feelings that were growing inside me. The line between care and desire was blurring, and I was caught in the middle, unable to find my way out. That night, as I lay in bed with Emma, my thoughts drifted to Laura. I imagined her touch, her scent, the way she made me feel alive in ways I hadn't felt in years. My body responded to the fantasy, and I turned away from Emma, guilt gnawing at my insides. I knew I was on the brink of something that could change everything, but the pull was too strong, the desire too intense. Laura's tender touch had healed more than just my burns. It had awakened a passion that was impossible to ignore, and as I drifted off to sleep, I wondered how long I could resist the temptation that was Laura. As the days passed, the tension between Laura and me became almost unbearable. Emma was busy with work, often leaving early and coming home late. Laura continued to care for me with the same tenderness, but now there was an electric undercurrent to every interaction. One evening, after Emma had left for a business dinner, Laura and I found ourselves alone again. We were in the living room, the soft glow of the fireplace casting shadows on the walls. I was sitting on the couch, my wounds nearly healed, but I still wore bandages that needed to be changed regularly. Laura approached me with the first aid kit, her eyes holding a mix of concern and something more. "Time to change those bandages," she said softly, her voice like a caress. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. She knelt beside me, her fingers deftly unwrapping the old bandages. Her touch was gentle, but every brush of her fingers sent a jolt of electricity through my body. I watched her face as she worked, her concentration, the way her lips parted slightly when she focused. "Thank you, Laura," I whispered, my voice husky with emotion. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine. There was a moment of silence, heavy with unspoken words. I reached out, my hand trembling slightly, and cupped her cheek. She leaned into my touch, her eyes closing briefly. "Alex," she murmured, her voice filled with longing. Before I could think, before I could stop myself, I leaned forward and kissed her. It was a tentative kiss at first, soft and hesitant. But then her lips parted, and the kiss deepened, becoming urgent and hungry. Her hands tangled in my hair, pulling me closer, and I wrapped my arms around her, holding her tightly. We pulled away, both of us breathless, our foreheads resting against each other. "This is wrong," she whispered, her voice shaky. "But it feels so right." "I know," I replied, my voice barely audible. "I can't help how I feel." Laura looked into my eyes, her expression conflicted. "We need to be careful, Alex. Emma, she can't know." I nodded, knowing the truth of her words. But the desire between us was undeniable, and I wasn't sure how long we could resist. The days that followed were a blur of stolen glances and fleeting touches. Emma remained oblivious, wrapped up in her work. Laura and I found moments to be alone, each encounter more charged than the last. The tension between us grew, a fire that refused to be extinguished. One afternoon, Laura and I were in the garden, tending to the flowers. The sun was warm on our skin, the scent of blooming roses filling the air. I watched her as she worked, the way her body moved with grace and elegance. She looked up and caught me staring, a smile playing on her lips. "You're distracted," she teased, a twinkle in her eye. "Can you blame me?" I replied, stepping closer. She laughed softly, the sound like music. "We need to be careful, Alex." "I know," I said, but I couldn't resist. I reached out and took her hand, pulling her close. She didn't resist, her body pressing against mine. We stood there, hidden by the tall hedges, our breath mingling. "I can't stop thinking about you," I confessed, my voice raw with emotion. "Me neither," she admitted, her eyes dark with desire. Before we knew it, we were kissing again, our hands exploring each other's bodies. It was a dance of passion, a release of the tension that had been building for weeks. Her touch was like fire, igniting every nerve in my body. We pulled away just in time, hearing the sound of Emma's car pulling into the driveway. We quickly composed ourselves, our hearts racing. Emma walked into the garden, smiling at the sight of us. "Looks like you two are getting along well," she said cheerfully. I forced a smile, my mind still reeling from the kiss. "Yeah, Laura's been amazing. She's the best," Emma agreed, giving her mother a hug. I watched them, a pang of guilt twisting in my stomach. I knew this couldn't continue, but I couldn't deny the feelings that had blossomed between Laura and me. That night, as Emma slept beside me, I lay awake, my thoughts consumed by Laura. I knew I was playing with fire, but the desire was too strong. I needed to find a way to navigate this forbidden attraction, to keep it hidden while still exploring the depths of my feelings for Laura. The next day, Laura and I found ourselves alone in the kitchen. She was making breakfast, and I couldn't take my eyes off her. She glanced at me, a knowing look in her eyes. "Last night," she began, but I cut her off. "I know, we have to be careful." She nodded, but the longing in her eyes was clear. "I don't know how much longer I can resist," she whispered. "Me neither," I admitted, stepping closer. "But we have to try, for Emma's sake." She sighed, her hand brushing against mine. "I know, but it's so hard." We stood there, the unspoken desire hanging in the air. I knew we were on a dangerous path, but I couldn't turn back now. The connection between us was too strong, the pull too irresistible. And as much as I knew it was wrong, I couldn't help but want more of Laura's tender touch. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Laura and I tried to maintain a facade of normalcy, but the tension between us was palpable. Each glance, each accidental touch sent sparks flying. Emma remained blissfully unaware, her focus on work and other responsibilities. It felt like we were living in a fragile bubble, ready to burst at any moment. One evening, Emma had to leave for a business trip that would keep her away for several days. The moment she left, the atmosphere between Laura and me shifted. The house felt larger, emptier, and the space between us seemed to shrink. That night, after Emma's departure, Laura and I found ourselves alone in the living room again. The fireplace crackled softly, casting a warm glow around the room. Laura sat beside me, her expression serious. "We need to talk, Alex," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I nodded, my heart pounding. "I know." She took a deep breath, her eyes searching mine. What we're doing, it's dangerous. We could hurt Emma so much." "I understand," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't stop thinking about you, Laura. I can't ignore these feelings." She looked away, her fingers nervously playing with the hem of her skirt. "I feel the same way, but we have to be careful. We can't let this destroy our family." I reached out, taking her hand in mine. "I don't want to hurt anyone, but I can't pretend this isn't real." She squeezed my hand, her eyes filling with unshed tears. "I know, and I don't want to lose you either." We sat in silence, the weight of our situation pressing down on us. Finally, Laura leaned closer, her lips brushing against my ear. "Come to my room tonight," she whispered, her voice like velvet. My breath caught in my throat. "Are you sure?" I asked, my heart racing. "Yes," she replied, her eyes burning with intensity. "I can't fight this anymore." Later that night, when the house was quiet and the only sounds were the creaking of the old floorboards, I made my way to Laura's room. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions: desire, guilt, fear, excitement. I stood outside her door for a moment, taking a deep breath before quietly opening it. Laura was waiting for me, sitting on the edge of her bed in a silk nightgown that clung to her curves. She looked up as I entered, her eyes filled with a mix of longing and apprehension. I closed the door behind me, the soft click echoing in the silence. "Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling. I moved toward her, my heart pounding in my chest. "Laura," I breathed, sitting beside her, "I want you so much." She reached out, her fingers trailing along my jawline. "I want you too," she said, her voice husky with emotion. We kissed then, a kiss filled with all the pent-up desire and longing that had been building between us. It was a kiss that spoke of forbidden love, of passion and need. Our hands roamed, exploring each other's bodies with a hunger that couldn't be denied. Laura pulled me down onto the bed, her body pressing against mine. The feel of her soft skin against me was intoxicating, her scent enveloping me. We moved together, a dance of desire that left us both breathless. Her touch was like fire, igniting every nerve in my body. I wanted to lose myself in her, to forget everything but the feel of her against me. As our bodies entwined, the world outside ceased to exist. There was only Laura and me, our passion consuming us. Every kiss, every touch was a declaration of the forbidden love we shared. The guilt and fear melted away, replaced by a need that was all-consuming. We made love with a fervor that bordered on desperation, our bodies seeking solace in each other. It was a night of raw emotion, of whispered confessions and tender caresses. When it was over, we lay tangled in each other's arms, our breathing heavy and our hearts pounding. "I love you," Laura whispered, her voice filled with vulnerability. "I love you too," I replied, holding her close. "But what are we going to do?" She sighed, her fingers tracing patterns on my chest. "I don't know, but we'll figure it out, together." The days that followed were a blur of stolen moments and secret meetings. Emma returned from her trip, and we had to be even more careful. But the connection between Laura and me only grew stronger. Every touch, every glance, was a reminder of the passion we shared. One afternoon, while Emma was at work, Laura and I found ourselves alone in the house. We were in the kitchen, the sunlight streaming through the windows, casting a golden glow around us. I watched as Laura prepared lunch, her movements graceful and fluid. "Can I help?" I asked, moving to stand beside her. She smiled, handing me a knife. "You can chop the vegetables." We worked side by side, the domesticity of the moment strangely comforting. As I chopped the vegetables, I felt Laura's eyes on me. I looked up, meeting her gaze. There was a heat in her eyes, a silent promise. We finished preparing lunch and sat down to eat, the air between us crackling with unspoken desire. As we ate, our fingers brushed, sending shivers down my spine. After we finished, Laura stood and walked around the table, stopping beside me. "Come with me," she whispered, holding out her hand. I took her hand, my pulse quickening. She led me upstairs to her room, closing the door behind us. The moment the door clicked shut, we were in each other's arms, our lips crashing together in a frenzy of passion. We made love again, our bodies moving together in perfect harmony. It was a dance of desire, a symphony of pleasure. Every touch, every kiss was a testament to the love we shared. We lost ourselves in each other, the outside world fading away. As we lay together afterward, tangled in each other's arms, I knew that we were on a dangerous path, but I couldn't bring myself to care. The love I felt for Laura was too strong, too powerful to deny. "We can't keep doing this," Laura said softly, her fingers tracing patterns on my chest. "I know," I replied, my heart aching, "but I can't let you go." "Neither can I," she admitted, her eyes filled with sadness. "But we have to find a way to make this work, for Emma's sake." I nodded, knowing she was right. We had to be careful, to find a way to navigate this forbidden love without destroying everything. It wouldn't be easy, but I was willing to do whatever it took to be with Laura. And as I held her close, I knew that no matter what happened, I would never let go of the love we shared. The days and weeks that followed were filled with a delicate balance of secrecy and passion. Laura and I continued to steal moments together whenever we could, each encounter more intense and more dangerous than the last. Emma remained oblivious, her work consuming most of her time. The guilt gnawed at me, but the pull of Laura's love was too strong to resist. One evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Laura and I found ourselves alone in the kitchen. The air was thick with unspoken tension. She was washing the dishes and I stood beside her, drying them. Our fingers brushed as I took a plate from her, and a shiver ran down my spine. "Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling, "we need to talk." I nodded, my heart pounding. "I know." She turned to face me, her eyes filled with a mix of longing and fear. "We can't keep living like this. It's too risky." "I know," I replied, my voice barely audible. "But what can we do? I can't stay away from you, Laura." She sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I feel the same way. But we have to find a solution. We can't keep sneaking around like this." I reached out and took her hand, pulling her closer. "I don't want to lose you." "You won't," she said, her eyes locking onto mine. "But we need to be smart about this, for Emma's sake." Before I could respond, we heard a noise behind us. We both turned to see Emma standing in the doorway, her eyes wide with shock. She had clearly heard everything. My heart dropped into my stomach. "Emma," I began, my voice shaking. "I can explain." "Explain what?" she demanded, her voice rising. "That you're having an affair with my mother?" I felt a wave of shame and guilt crash over me. Laura stepped forward, her face pale. "Emma, please, let us explain." Emma's eyes filled with tears and she shook her head. "I trusted you both. How could you do this to me?" I reached out, but she stepped back, her expression one of hurt and betrayal. "Emma, please, just listen." "I don't want to hear it," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't believe this." She turned and fled up the stairs, slamming her bedroom door behind her. Laura and I stood there in stunned silence, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. The fragile bubble we had been living in had finally burst. "We have to fix this," Laura whispered, her voice filled with despair. "We can't let this destroy everything." I nodded, knowing she was right. But how could we repair the damage we had caused? The love we shared had come at a terrible cost, and now we had to face the consequences. The next morning, Emma was gone. She had left a note saying she needed some time to think and would be staying with a friend for a while. The house felt empty without her, the silence oppressive. Laura and I were left to grapple with the fallout of our actions. Days turned into weeks, and Emma remained distant. She refused to speak to either of us, her anger and hurt palpable. Laura and I tried to find a way to move forward, but the weight of our guilt was crushing. The passion that had once consumed us now felt like a burden, a constant reminder of the pain we had caused. One evening, Laura and I sat in the garden, the setting sun casting a golden glow around us. We held hands, the silence between us heavy with unspoken words. "I can't lose her," Laura said, her voice breaking. "She's my daughter, and she's my wife," I replied, my heart aching. "We have to find a way to make this right." Laura nodded, tears streaming down her face. "But how? How do we fix something so broken?" I didn't have an answer. The love we shared had brought us so much joy, but it had also caused so much pain. We were caught in a web of our own making, and there seemed to be no way out. As the weeks passed, Emma eventually agreed to meet with us. We sat down together, the tension in the room palpable. Emma looked at us with a mixture of anger and sadness, her eyes filled with hurt. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, she said, her voice trembling. But I need to understand why. Laura reached out, her hand trembling. Emma, we never meant to hurt you. It just happened. The connection between us, it was something we couldn't control. Emma looked at her mother, her expression one of deep pain. You should have controlled it. You should have thought about me. I felt a lump form in my throat. Emma, I love you and I love Laura, but I never wanted this to hurt you. Emma's eyes filled with tears and she shook her head. I don't know if I can ever trust either of you again. We sat in silence, the weight of her words hanging over us. I knew that the road to forgiveness would be long and difficult, but I was willing to do whatever it took to mend the broken pieces of our lives. In the days that followed, we began the slow process of healing. Emma agreed to stay with us, but the tension was still there, a constant reminder of our betrayal. Laura and I tried to give her space, to show her that we were committed to making things right. But the love between Laura and me was still there, an undeniable force that pulled us together. We knew that we had to be careful, to find a way to balance our feelings with the need to rebuild our relationship with Emma. It was a delicate dance, one that required patience and understanding. But as we moved forward, I began to see a glimmer of hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was determined to find a way to make it work, for Emma's sake and for the love that Laura and I shared. The weeks that followed were fraught with tension and unease. Emma stayed with us, but the atmosphere in the house was charged with unresolved emotions and unspoken words. Laura and I did our best to give her space, to show her that we were committed to healing the wounds we had caused. But the love between Laura and me was still a powerful, undeniable force that we struggled to contain. One evening, as we sat in the living room, the silence between us was suffocating. Emma was upstairs in her room and Laura and I were alone, the weight of our situation pressing down on us. Laura looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and longing. Alex, she began, her voice trembling. We need to talk. I nodded, my heart heavy. I know. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. I love you, but we can't keep living like this. It's tearing us apart and it's hurting Emma. I felt a lump form in my throat. What are you saying? We need to end this, she said, her eyes brimming with tears. For Emma's sake and for ours. We need to find a way to move on. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had known this moment was coming, but hearing it out loud made it all the more real. But I love you, Laura. I don't know if I can let you go. She reached out, taking my hand in hers. I love you too, Alex. But sometimes love isn't enough. We have to think about Emma, about what's best for her. We can't keep living in this constant state of tension and secrecy. It's not fair to anyone. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. I understand. But it's going to be so hard. I know, she whispered, her voice breaking. But we have to try, for Emma. We sat in silence, holding each other, the reality of our decision sinking in. The love we shared had brought us so much joy, but it had also caused so much pain. Now we had to find a way to let go, to move forward separately. The next day, Laura and I sat down with Emma. We told her about our decision, about our commitment to putting her first. Emma listened, her expression a mix of relief and sadness. She had been caught in the middle of our love affair, and it had taken a toll on her. Thank you, she said quietly. I know this isn't easy for either of you, but I appreciate that you're thinking about me. We love you, Emma, Laura said, her voice filled with emotion. We never wanted to hurt you. I know, Emma replied, her eyes filling with tears. I just need time to process everything. In the weeks that followed, Laura and I began the painful process of decoupling. We still cared deeply for each other, but we knew that our relationship had to change. We focused on rebuilding our relationship with Emma, showing her that we were committed to healing the wounds we had caused. It was a difficult and emotional journey. There were moments when the longing between Laura and me was almost unbearable, but we held back, reminding ourselves of our commitment to Emma. We found ways to channel our feelings into positive actions, working together to create a more harmonious home environment. Emma slowly began to open up to us, her anger and hurt gradually giving way to forgiveness. It was a slow process, but each small step forward felt like a victory. We spent more time together as a family, finding new ways to connect and rebuild the trust that had been shattered. One afternoon, as we sat in the garden, Emma looked at us with a tentative smile. I know this hasn't been easy for any of us, she said softly. but I appreciate that you're both trying to make things right. We love you, Emma, I said, my voice filled with sincerity. We want to do whatever it takes to make this work. Laura nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. We'll always be here for you, no matter what. As we sat together, the sun setting in the distance, I felt a sense of hope for the first time in a long while. The road ahead would be difficult, but I knew that with time and effort, we could find a way to heal and move forward. Laura and I continued to support each other, but our relationship shifted. We became friends, confidants, and partners in healing, rather than lovers. It was a painful adjustment, but it was necessary for the sake of our family. The love we had shared would always be a part of us, but we had to let it go to create a healthier future. And as we navigated the complexities of our new dynamic, I found solace in the strength of our bond and the resilience of our family. In the end, love had brought us together and torn us apart, but it had also given us the strength to heal and move forward. And as we faced the future together, I knew that we could overcome any challenge as long as we had each other. The months that followed were a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of love, even when it is tested to its limits. Laura and I had made a promise to each other and to Emma, and we were determined to keep it. The process of healing was slow and often painful, but we faced it together, bound by a commitment to mend the fractured pieces of our family. Emma gradually began to rebuild her life. She found solace in her work, threw herself into new projects, and spent more time with friends. She even started seeing a therapist, which helped her process the complex emotions she was dealing with. Laura and I were there for her every step of the way, offering our support and understanding. Our relationship, once marked by forbidden passion, transformed into something deeper and more profound. Laura and I became each other's confidants, leaning on each other for strength as we navigated this new chapter of our lives. The love we had shared was still there, but it was now tempered by a mutual respect and understanding of our boundaries. One evening, as the three of us sat around the dinner table, Emma looked at us with a soft smile. "I think I'm ready to move back home," she said, her voice steady and sure. Laura and I exchanged a glance, a mixture of relief and sadness washing over us. "Are you sure?" Laura asked gently. Emma nodded. "Yes, I need to find my own space again, to start fresh. But I want us to stay close. I want us to keep working on this. On us." I reached across the table and took her hand. "We want that too, Emma. We'll always be here for you." The move was bittersweet. Watching Emma pack her things and leave the house felt like the end of an era, but it was also the beginning of a new one. She found a small apartment not far from us, and we helped her settle in, making sure she knew she was always welcome to come home whenever she needed. With Emma starting her new life, Laura and I had to redefine our own relationship. We continued to support each other, but we also made a conscious effort to establish our own identities outside of the intense bond we had shared. Laura resumed her gardening, finding peace and joy in tending to her plants, while I focused on my work and hobbies. We maintained our friendship, often spending time together, but always keeping our promise to Emma at the forefront of our minds. Our interactions were filled with warmth and genuine affection, but the passionate intensity that once defined our relationship had given way to something more stable and sustainable. One afternoon while Emma was visiting, we sat in the garden, enjoying the warm sunshine and the vibrant colors of the blooming flowers. Emma looked around, her eyes shining with a newfound sense of peace. "This place is beautiful," she said, her voice filled with appreciation. "It feels like home." Laura smiled, her eyes meeting mine with a shared understanding. "It is home, for all of us." Emma nodded, taking a deep breath. "I'm glad we've come through this. It's been hard, but I feel like we're stronger now." "We are," I agreed, my heart swelling with pride and love for the two women who had become the most important people in my life. We've all grown, and we're all still here. That's what matters. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the garden, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey had been tumultuous, filled with pain and heartache, but it had also been a journey of growth and healing. We had faced our darkest moments and come out stronger on the other side. Laura and I would always share a special bond, one forged in the fires of passion and tempered by the trials we had faced. Our love had transformed, but it had not diminished. Instead, it had become a source of strength and comfort, a reminder of the resilience of the human heart. Emma had found her own path, emerging from the shadows of our mistakes with a strength and grace that inspired me every day. She had shown me the power of forgiveness and the importance of family, teaching me lessons I would carry with me for the rest of my life. In the end, our story was one of love and redemption, of finding light in the darkest of times and holding on to it with all our might. It was a story of three people who had been broken, but had found a way to heal together, creating a new, stronger bond that would withstand any storm. As I sat in the garden with Laura and Emma, the past behind us and the future ahead, I knew that we had finally found our way home.